Krishna Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. Thank you very much for coming today. Yes, please. Do you have any preference? You start with.
So there's many questions, so we'll start with the first one.
Please start.
So the question is, I think it's very pertinent. Children today have a lot of internet access, and there's so many dangers of the internet. So how do we handle this?
Hare Krishna. So, in the Bhagavad-Gita, the 3rd chapter, Krishna talks about broadly 2 principles for managing any kind of damaging desire. Krishna talks about this broadly in 336 to 43. This is a section on karma. Now, while karma is sometimes translated as lust, it also refers to any self-destructive desire, anything which is harmful for us. So this is present in children, this can be present in adults also. The principles are same, the application will be slightly varying. So what Krishna says in that section, broadly speaking, is that he says that there are 2 main things that are required for us to protect ourselves, or anyone else for that matter, from destructive desire. He talks about a hierarchy in 342. What's happening here? Okay. In 342, he says that the senses are here, and below that the sense objects are there. So Krishna talks essentially about a 2-pronged strategy. About the senses is the mind. Above the mind is the intelligence. And above the intelligence is the soul. Indriyani paranyahur indriyebhya param manaha manasastu para buddheyo buddhe paratastu saha. So basically this whole thing is the condition, is the soul. Conditioned self, basically, you can say. Now, the first step Krishna says, which is essential, is to create some barriers. So he says regulation. Tasmat tam indriyanyadau niyamya bharatarshava. So the senses will go toward the sense objects, and the sense objects will tempt the senses. So that is just natural. And if that is to be stopped, then there has to be some boundary. Niyamya adau. So now, for adults, quite often, we have to have self-defined boundaries. Now, for our children, we have to define the boundaries. Now, of course, children depends on what age it is and how much boundaries they will accept. The specifics of the boundaries may need to be negotiated. Now, so if in general, the Bhagavatam talks about the principle of using a thorn to cut out a thorn, to remove a thorn from the body. That means if technology is creating the danger, sometimes we may have to use technology itself to minimize the danger. So we have apps which can monitor, there are parental control apps or whatever. So something like that is essential. Now, as I said, the extent of the specific degree may vary from situation to situation, from age to age, person to person. But without regulation, it is very difficult to expect that a person not be pulled down. So there is, Krishna explains here, a downward pull. This is just like there is gravity which pulls a person down, If I hold this phone, let go, it's going to fall. So like that, if we just let our consciousness loose, it will go down. And that happens even more for children, because that is the age when they're adolescent, the hormones are getting activated. It's a turbulent age. Now, they may not like boundaries, but then one of the most difficult jobs about parenting is doing things that the children don't like. That's a part of it. I think it's Mark Twain who said that. When I was 17, my father was a fool. Now I'm 25 and I'm amazed how much the old guy has learned in the last 8 years. So it's not so much the old guy that learned, it's that a person at 25 thinks differently from the person at 17. So when the person starts taking responsibility, then the person starts recognizing the importance of boundaries. So some kind of boundaries need to be there. Now that alone, however, is not enough. Krishna says that the second part of this is evam buddhe param buddhva. So this boundary principle he talks in 341, the previous verse. So Krishna said this is the first thing that is required. This hierarchy itself he mentions in 342. But beyond that, he says with our intelligence we need to establish an upward connection. Evam buddhe param buddhva samsthabhyatmanam. So this is the connection. The intelligence establishes a connection with the soul. One becomes situated on the spiritual platform. Now that means that we need to, over a period of time, for ourselves develop our intelligence, and for our children help them develop their intelligence. So that means don't just say no, but explain why that no is being said. So to the extent intelligence is developed, to that extent a person starts seeing that okay, this may be enjoyable now, but there is some harm in the future. And that way, as the intelligence is developed, what the intelligence does when it is developed is, it starts seeing that there is the present me and there is the future me. So now, if the intelligence is underdeveloped, then what happens is, all that I care for is the present me. I want to enjoy right now, this gives me enjoyment. And to some extent, it's understandable in children like that. But as we start growing, as our intelligence starts developing, we start understanding that the future me is also important. And something that that the present me sacrifices can actually help the future me. So we could say there is some kind of pendulum. If only the present me, then this will eventually lead to degradation. If I care only for the present me, and this is what children will do if they are let go, and this is what our own mind will do if it's let free. But on the other hand, if we care only for the future me, and the present me is not cared for at all, then that person experiences suffocation. So we need to be able to find a balance between caring for the future me and caring for the present me. And this is where the intelligence comes in. So to the extent the intelligence is developed, to that extent a person starts taking responsibility for themselves. So the intelligence is not yet developed. Hare Krishna. Yeah. Now, so this connection that we help them develop their intelligence. So in general, it's very easy. So we could say that when we are communicating with our children, there are two ways. We could give an instruction or we could give a vision. Instruction is do this, don't do this. Vision is where if you do this, this will happen. If you do this, this will happen. So when they are when they are small, we may just have to give instructions. Don't do this. Don't touch that wire. Don't put your hand near fire or whatever. But as they grow older, we cannot keep giving instructions. They will just rebel. So over a period of time, we need to move towards giving vision. And as we start giving them vision, then they themselves start growing. And they take responsibility. In fact, this is what Krishna does in the Bhagavad-Gita. To Arjuna there are very few instructions in the Bhagavad-Gita. There are some like Sarvadharman Parityajya. But most of the verses in the Bhagavad-Gita are explanations that are meant to provide a vision. So Chanakya Pandit says that in some phase of the life, we just care and comfort the children when they are small babies. As they grow older, we may have to give them instructions. But as they grow further older, then we need to give them vision. We can't give them instruction. Putram mitravan acharet. So this could be initially, but eventually we give them vision. And that's where intelligence is developed. So this is a broad overview of the analysis for this. Okay? Thank you.
Next question. This is about time management. How can we manage the time to keep the children always in Krishna consciousness?
Are you talking about our time or their time?
Both.
Well, with respect to Krishna consciousness, I think the most important thing that the parents need to do is give children happy memories of bhakti. Now, specific habits, specific bhakti practices, they're good if they have, but eventually the children are going to grow up and they're going to make their decisions. So if they look back at their childhood and their prominent memory of bhakti is that, I was forced to wake up in the morning and I used to sit and just chant for a long time and I just didn't like it. I was bored. If that's their prominent memory, as they grow up, then they'll say, I don't want to do this. But if their prominent memory is that, we used to go to the temple and we used to dance in kirtan, or we had this dramas and I dressed up in this costume and I played this role and everybody applauded. I memorized these verses and everybody cheered. So the key legacy from a spiritual perspective, from parents to children, the legacy with respect to spirituality is happy memories. Yes, of course there is some discipline required. But overall, if the happy memories are provided, then when they grow older, those memories will draw them toward bhakti eventually. So with respect to managing time, yes, as parents we have a lot of expectations from our children. We want them to do well academically, we want them to be well-behaved human beings. And sometimes bhakti can seem one more added burden of expectation. So if that is happening, then we need to recalibrate. In many ways, bhakti should be a place where they can relax and rejuvenate themselves. Yes, there is some austerity in bhakti, no doubt. But if bhakti just feels like another burden, then they will not be able to continue. So we need to see what engagements they can be given in bhakti by which they feel that this is rejuvenating them. So to put in contemporary language, we have to make bhakti cool. Now, how do we do that? Well, there are challenges in that, but there was one place in America where a nice community, and the kids, when they were up to 10, 12, they would all enthusiastically come to the temple, but once they get into teenage, then it's almost like they become a different person. So they would not want to come. And then they would invite, parents would request them to come, sometimes insist. It was not working. Then one of the youth leaders, see, generally at that age, when they're teens, what is happening, teen is a very turbulent age. It's basically they are caught between two phases. Basically, they're seen when they're searching for their identity. At one level, if you consider they're growing, they are too old to think of themselves only as their parents' children. I am so and so's child. They're too old to accept, to be satisfied with that identity alone. But at the same time, they are too young to have forged their own identity. They are not, say, engineer, doctor, or they're not a professional. They're not really achieved much in their life. So at this phase, they are trying to assert their identity. And that is why peer pressure is so big. Because for them, the most important place for establishing their identity is among their peers. So sometimes the way they establish their identity is by going against what their parents are doing. That's why I say the same kids, who are very happy to be hugged by their mother, when they grow into teenage, they don't want to be publicly hugged by their. I'm not a small boy, baby now. So that starts happening. So at this point, often at this point, instead of bhakti coming vertically, it comes more laterally. That means not somebody from the age generation of their parents, but somebody from in between generation. The kids are 15. There's a youth group led by somebody of the age of 25. Then not the age of their parents. Then they're more open to that. So anyway, there was this young devotee. He said that we want to make our temple green. We want to make it eco-friendly. And he asked the kids, can you take charge of that? And now being eco-friendly is very cool in today's universities, colleges. So the kids started coming to the temples, not so much to attend the class, but to say after the prasadam who was throwing what plate where. And make sure that all the recyclable is going here, the other is going there. And not only that, they even invited their peers to come to the temple. Not so much to see the deities, but to see how we have done this project. And then, not only that, eventually what they did was, somebody got the idea, they wrote an article in the college magazine about how this Krishna temple was the first temple to be made green by the students themselves. And they became a hit over there. So we need to think about ideas by which bhakti can become cool for them. If that happens, then they won't see that as another burden. They will see it, this is something I look forward to do. So, bhakti is ultimately about not just chanting or doing this activity. Bhakti is about developing their relationship with Krishna. So, if they are inviting somebody to come to Krishna's temple, that means they have become hosts for the temple, not just guests in the temple. And that is a significant development in their relationship with Krishna, irrespective of whether they are doing specific practices or not. Okay, thank you.
So the next question is on anger management. So the question is, this is both for children and the parents, primarily more for parents, asking how do we control our anger despite telling them very nicely to do something or not to do something, they're not listening. So how do we?
Yeah. My brother became a parent a few years ago. So he told me, now I discovered how short-tempered I am. He said, I used to think that I'm a very cool person. But it's only when we experience insubordination in the closest of our relationships, that's when we start realizing, I tend to get angry. And it's easy to justify the anger also. Because we say, I'm right and I'm concerned about you. This is for your own good. So, we may have a right to be angry. But still, we may not be right to be angry. There's a difference. I have reason to be angry. In that sense, it's my right. But we say, it may not be right to be angry in the sense that it may not have the right result. So this does not necessarily mean that we can or never should be angry. The point is, anger at one level is a messenger. And anger is a messenger that informs us that something is seriously wrong. In general, anger is an expensive emotion. Anger takes a big toll on us physiologically, psychologically. So, we won't just get angry over trivial things. Once I was doing some conflict resolution. So, mediation I was trying to do. So, one devotee approached the other devotee. He says, I know you are angry with me. And the other devotee says, no, I am not angry with you. He says, anger is an expensive emotion. And I have decided that you are not worth it. Now, that's a terrible way to dehumanize someone. Now, yeah, there are many issues that are not worth getting angry over, but we don't have to communicate like that. My point is that anger is an expensive emotion. So, when we get angry about something, that means something is seriously wrong with something that is seriously important for us. But the problem is that anger is a very loud messenger, but is also a very unclear messenger. That means somebody screams, and they scream, we cannot but pay attention. But then, okay, what's wrong? And he's screaming incoherently. What's wrong? We just can't figure it out. So anger is a messenger. It is loud and unclear. Sometimes what happens, we get angry and we explode at someone, and then after that we ourselves wonder, why did I get so angry about this? Sometimes it may be clear to us, but many times when we are angry, it's not clear to the other person why we are so angry. So when anger is a messenger, it can be desirable in the sense that if something is seriously wrong with something that is seriously important for us, we need to know about it. So anger as a messenger is something we cannot neglect. But anger becomes a master very quickly. And when it becomes a master, it is a bad master. That means when you are feeling angry, okay, yell at someone. Do this, do that. Often that makes things worse. So the key to anger management is to somehow create a bridge between, not a bridge, a barrier between anger as a messenger and anger as a master. That means that, okay, if I'm angry, just control your anger. Well, okay, but the underlying issue has not been addressed when I control my anger. But what the underlying issue is exactly, first I need to understand myself. And then after that, I need to find the right words to communicate them to the other person. So generally, when when our kids do something that angers us, it's very easy to, in one sense, fly off the handle. And we will be justified. But that will only make them either clamp down or close down more or become more rebellious. So maybe, if that's why, if there are two parents, then they can discuss with each other, okay, what exactly happened. That's why if there are single parent families, it's much, much more difficult. If there are single parent families and they're taking care of children, then that's laudable that they're doing that. But in general, parenting is difficult. And when one person is trying to do it alone, then it becomes even more difficult. Because there is very little phase to transit between these two. So in general, if there are two parents, then broadly speaking, one parent can offer more of unconditional love, and the other parent can offer a little bit more of conditional love. Now, conditional love means that parenting means having expectations. And it means that the kids need to grow up, they need to take responsibility. So that expectation is also required. So now, which parent will play what role, that has to be decided carefully. But if there is proper discussion, okay, if both parents agree that this is a serious thing, then when they convey to their children, the child will also take it seriously. Otherwise, one parent just comes off as being short-tempered or as the bad guy, and the other parent just seems to be negligent or whatever. So the challenge is finding out how we can see what is the information that anger is conveying to us as a messenger, and not let it immediately take charge, become the master. So if you could say, with respect to emotions like anger, one extreme is to just express it. I feel angry, I yell. That burns others. But the other is, we could just suppress it. Now that will burn us. And it will burn us until the burn becomes unbearable. Then we will burn others in a big blow. So finally, when something comes up and we explode, that might be a small thing, but there have been 1,117 things before that all have triggered this flame now. Now, in between these two is to process. So not express, not suppress, but process. And that's why I may be talking with the other parent, talking with other parents who are also in similar issues, that can help us to better process. And that way, the information content of anger can be extracted, and then it can be expressed in a way that will be more effective, more likely to be effective. Okay, thank you.
So, next question. Our children go to public schools and they have to associate with other non-devotees. So the other non-devotees, their lifestyle, their way of life is different. So how can we, not be affected by other children's bad association?
Yeah. How many of you are Asians? Okay. Asians. Okay. How many of you think of yourself as Asians? Isn't it? We may think of ourselves as the Indians. We may think ourselves of not even the Indians. I'm a South Indian, I'm a North Indian. And not in South Indian, I'm an Andhra, I'm from Andhra, I'm not from Tamil Nadu, whatever. Isn't it? So my point is, Asian is too big a category to be very helpful. And within Asians, there are Chinese, there are Filipino, there are Arabs, there are Indians, there are Japanese. So like that, just as Asians is a very big category, it's sometimes too big a category to be helpful. So similarly, at least my understanding is that just using the category non-devotees is too big a category to be helpful. It is, there's some utility of course, that there are devotees and non-devotees. But the Bhagavad-Gita itself offers us another categorization. And that is Sattvic. Sattvic is those who are in the mode of goodness. Then Rajasic. And then there is Tamasic. So we could say Sattvic is broadly pro-devotional. Rajasic is largely non-devotional. That means say people in Rajoguna are just primarily concerned about their work. I want to excel, I want to get to the top, I want money, I want fame, I want success. And because of that Rajoguna, they may also stay away from bad habits, because they know that this will destroy me. And then there are Tamasic, which is anti-devotional. So sometimes we equate all non-devotees with tamasic. But that is a mistake. Even among people who are non-devotees, even among kids, there are kids who are relatively sattvic. And there are kids who may just want to play video games all day. And there are kids who would like to read books. Now you could say reading books is, even if they are reading novels or fiction or whatever, still reading books is, say, healthier than just surfing on the net or spending time on TikTok or whatever. So there are gradations even in the activities that kids are doing. So if kids are forming a book club and they are reading books, that's a sattvic activity. They may not be spiritual books, but still, just the activity of reading books requires a certain level of sattva guna. So similarly, even among kids, there are in any demographic, whether it be our colleagues in office, our neighbors around us, or even our kids' social circle, there will be some kids who are relatively in sattva guna. They are more interested in studies, and not just studies, they may be interested in maybe some co-curricular, extracurricular activities. They want to do research and write papers and do this and do that. And there are some in Rajoguna. And there are many more in Rajoguna than Sattva Guna. And there are just as, if not more, in Tamoguna. Now, of course, college life is glamorized for what is Rajasic, Tamasic. But that's not the only thing that happens. So, if we can equip our children to understand the difference, that rather than simply categorizing as devotees and non-devotees, that there are healthy habits and there are unhealthy habits. And that differentiation does not necessarily equate to the differentiation between devotees and non-devotees. There are non-devotees also who may have some healthy habits. So if kids can associate it more, even in their social circle, no kid wants to be left out completely. They need to be a part of the social circle. So now some of the behavior that they pick up from there may be against the values that we want to teach them. And that's understandable enough. Then we tell them that this is our culture, this is our tradition, this is what we are trying to follow. But if we just tell them everything that non-devotees are doing is bad, then they will just feel completely isolated. And then they won't be able to, they will eventually start resenting bhakti itself. So even like I mentioned in the previous session, that in our tradition also there are some things which are negotiable, some things which are non-negotiable. So like that, one way of understanding negotiable, non-negotiable is Sattva-guna, Rajoguna, Tamoguna. And that way, we ourselves can discern among the non-devotee that we associate with. And then we can help our children also to discern that. Initially, we discern for them. And we can tell, you spend more time with this friend and not so much with that friend. But over a period of time, we equip them to make that differentiation. Okay. Thank you.
So this is regarding teenage children. So the question is, when do we stop disciplining or telling them what to do, and when do we give them the full liberty? Is there a time where we will let them go on autopilot, or how do we deal with this sort of power struggle, or give them full trust to operate on their own, or teenage?
Yeah, it's a very difficult question, because surrender, the Bhagavad-Gita also says there are two different kinds of surrender. There is, generally we think of surrender, there is Draupadi's surrender. So Jesus raised her arms in helpless dependence when she was being threatened by Dushasan. But interestingly, that is not the only form of surrender. If we consider Arjuna's surrender, Arjuna was also told by Krishna, surrender at the end of the Bhagavad-Gita. And Arjuna said, yes, I'll surrender. But Arjuna didn't surrender by raising his arms. Arjuna surrendered by raising his arms. He picked up his bow in readiness to fight. So, when our kids are small, then our surrender like Arjuna's surrender. We raise our bow to protect our kids. But as they grow older, it becomes Draupadi's surrender. No, no, how much can we control them? So ultimately, we have to, in one sense, help them develop their conscience. So this is a broad principle. We consider, say, this is Krishna. This is, say, parent. And this is the child. So the parents have the relationship with Krishna, the parent has the relationship with the child, and the child has a relationship with Krishna. So now we could say these three relationships are 1, 2, 3. In the sense that we can most control, say, our relationship with Krishna. We can practice our bhakti. Now to some extent, we have some control in our relationship with our children. And we have the least control in their relationship with Krishna. That means their conscience, their morality, how they behave basically. But broadly speaking, so with respect to control, we have 1 is greater than 2 is greater than 3. But in general, if we do 1 and 2 properly, if we are practicing our bhakti properly, and we are trying to be parent as well as we can, given all our conditionings, then over a period of time, it is that they start developing their relationship with Krishna. After all, they're not just our children, they're Krishna's children. And Krishna cares for them also. So, as they start developing their inner compass, then we need to stop imposing our compass on them. But now exactly at what age or when it will happen, that will vary. In general, the Western parenting style is to let children just do what they want. I was at one American devotee's house, and I was talking with them. Their daughter was not at home. So she was just finished 12th. I said, "Oh, so what is she planning to do after 12th?" And the father looked at his mother. "Hey, I don't think we ever asked her that, isn't it?" Now, among Indian parents, probably 5-6 years before itself that discussion starts. So not only they not discuss, discussion, it's only I would ask her, what do you want to do? So it's a very different parenting dynamic. Now that doesn't, that's generally not the healthiest dynamic to have, is to leave everything to the parents. But now the Eastern parenting, it's not just Indian, it's even Chinese parenting, is to have, relatively speaking, more control on the children. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. It has worked out well in the sense that generally every country that we see, the immigrant kids are often more successful than the kids of the people who are from the West. So there is virtue to that. But we cannot have either extreme, complete freedom or just complete control. So it's a gradual letting go of the control. And then we see, if we give them some freedom, how do they use it? And if they also understand that if they use the freedom that we give them responsibly, they will get more freedom. Then they will try to earn the freedom rather than grab the freedom. Grabbing the freedom means they try to do something behind the back, they try to do secretly. But if we say that, as a growing child, I want to help you be free. But you need to earn it by being responsible. So, let them, in one sense, we give them the terms. This is what you need to do on earning your freedom. So, if they're earning, then they won't be grabbing, they won't be sneaking. It's much, much better. So, if we give the terms for that, if we clarify the expectations, then it's relatively easier. Okay? Yeah, shall we stop? You can just speak if you want without it.
Yeah, it's having some feedback. Yeah. So the next one is, I think there's few questions, but the form is the same thing. So the thing is, how can we encourage children to be more participative in devotional activities? Can they keep them?
I think I just discussed that, like make bhakti cool. You have to find out in their ethos, in their social circle, what appeals to them the most. Or which, so if you consider, this is the circle of bhakti. And say, this is the circle of our children's interests. So we need to find out where these two intersect. Now, of course, some activities we may expect or insist that they do, and they do it out of their deference for us, out of their obedience for us. But eventually, if you can find out where these two intersect, then they will take up bhakti on their own. And they will do it because they want to do it. Now, I was in America visiting one devotee's house, and there both the parents are brilliant. The mother has 2 PhDs, the father has 3 PhDs. And the kid was just 10, and he was in the national robotic champion team for America, or at least for his state. It was quite brilliant. So the parents we were talking with him, and the parents were saying that, when he was 5, 6, 7, he was so interested in bhakti. And then he discovered robots. He just forgot Krishna after that. So I was talking with the kid afterward, and I asked him some questions about robots, and it was like the Ganga started flowing through his mouth. He just so enthusiastically speaking about everything. Then I asked him that, okay, when you make these robots, so how do you decide what robots to make for your exhibits or for your competitions? So he says, generally we make robots which are very efficient at picking things, moving things, and the main funding for the robotics industry is primarily coming from Amazon and companies like that. They want to automate the whole packing, unpacking, transporting process, at least in their warehouses. So he says, that's our focus. He says, and I asked him, do they like new ideas? He said, yeah, of course, innovation is appreciated. So I said, what do you think about making a robot of Krishna speaking some verses from the Bhagavad-Gita? He said, no, that's not a good idea. Then we talked for a few minutes, he went away, and I continued talking with his parents. And after about 10 minutes, he came back. He says, actually, that's not such a bad idea. He says, nobody else will think about it. And he says, nowadays, there's this whole culture of diversity and inclusivity. So it could be quite good. So I'll think about it. Then after a week, his parents called me, and they said that, actually, our son is now reading the Bhagavad-Gita to find out which verses will sound cool on his Krishna robot. So to some extent, we ourselves need to open our minds about what bhakti is. Bhakti is not just coming to the temple. Bhakti is that those things are important. But bhakti is much, much more. So sometimes we may think, their interests have nothing to do with Krishna. But if we are creative, we are also prayerful, we observe our kids, then we can find out where their interests can intersect with Krishna. And that's how we can inspire them to engage more in bhakti.
Okay, so this question is for parents. They are saying, how do we stay motivated, juggling between the demands of job, sadhana, service at the temple, and also raising the children nicely? How do we always stay motivated without getting burned out?
Yeah. In general, if we consider the activities that we do, there's a spectrum of activities. And they broadly fall in 2 categories. We could say activities that give strength to us and activities that require strength from us. This is actually similar to people in our lives. Some people, we look forward to meeting them. And some people will look forward to ending our meeting with them. Isn't it? So, why? Because some people, we meet them, it's so just enjoyable being with them. We feel energized after meeting with them. But some people, when we meet them, it's like we think we have walked in the minefield. Every word has to be extremely carefully measured, and what will trigger, what will cause an explosion. So after the meeting is over, we feel we have relieved now. So there are people like that, and we can't avoid the second category of people. But if it's only the second category of people that we are meeting all the time, then we will be drained. We need to find people who fall in the first category for us, and we need to spend time with them. That's how we manage our emotional strength, relational strength. And the same applies to activities. So there are activities that give us strength, and there are activities that require strength from us. Now sometimes they may not be that clearly black and white, because sometimes the same activity one day gives us strength, another day it requires strength from us, which is okay. But broadly, if we understand, these are the activities that give me strength, and these are the activities that require strength. And if we make sure that we make time for these activities, then we will feel motivated enough to do these activities also. But if everything that we do is just one more chore, one more burden, then soon our motivation will run out. So the key to having motivation is to make sure that we make time for the activities that give us strength.
So this question is saying, I think related to teenage children. Being in Western country like Australia, the free mixing between boys and girls are so rampant. So how do we prevent our children from adopting this culture?
Okay, so free mixing between boys and girls, well, between kids. I think that is becoming a problem even in India now, because especially cities like Mumbai or others, they are also quite westernized. So I think it may be definitely more in the West, in the sense that there are so many examples where it just seems that if they're not doing it, then they are the odd people out. Whereas in India, yes, there are people who do it, but it's not that everybody is necessarily doing it, at least not in all the places. So at one level, there is, in general, across the genders, male-female interaction, there always have to be some boundaries. Now, in the past, the boundaries might have been decided just by the roles. Now, women had particular roles, men had particular roles. And their roles required them to be in different places. Or the boundaries could also be decided by culture. In different cultures, the men and women interact at different distances. Now, we may say in today, the roles are very intermixed, people work together, the culture is also very different. But still, even in today's world, there is a basic level of boundaries, and that is consent. That is considered to be an inviolable boundary, and it's criminal if that boundary is violated. So now, the point I'm making is, everybody recognizes the need for boundaries. The specific boundaries, that is what has radically changed. But there's a principle of boundaries and there is a specific of boundaries. So the principle is universal and the specific is widely variant. So in today's culture, we generally can't expect, say, the same boundaries of gender interaction that, say, we grew up with. Because if that's just not, it's unlikely that it's even practical for them. But now what boundaries are practical? So what boundaries are reasonable? This is not just a challenge. Again, I said that when we talk about non-devotees, all non-devotees are not the same. If you consider, there are people from other religious traditions, and they also insist on boundaries. Whether it's Christians or sometimes Muslims, they impose boundaries much more than other ethnicities. But the principle is universal. Now, with respect to the specific, it can't work simply by giving instruction to them. It won't make. They will just rebel against it. And it's not even they. Their hormones will make them rebel against it. And so at that time, when this particular struggle is going on, it's important that, I think I mentioned this point, that, oh God, if you're looking at teenage children, we don't see them that they are being difficult. That's one way, why don't they listen to me? They are being difficult. Well, that's one way of looking at it, but it's much more helpful if you look at it. They are in difficulty. They are themselves struggling internally with their hormones, externally with their peer pressure. And if they see us as somebody who is further adding to their difficulty, then they will just create walls between us and them. But if somehow they start seeing that, we want to be of help to them. So one of the biggest problems is that the kids feel a parent just don't understand. And if somebody feels that they don't understand, then what happens is they just stop speaking. See, for the heart, understanding is as necessary, or you could say the emotional heart, the heart which is concerned with emotions. For that heart, understanding is as much necessary as for the body or the biological heart, oxygen is necessary. So if there's no understanding, then there is suffocation. So sometimes you may feel, my kids just don't speak to me. Especially that happens in teenage, and that happens primarily because maybe they tried speaking and they found that they're just not going to understand, so better let's not speak only. So whenever they open, whenever they speak, today something interesting happened in college. Well then, if you're looking at your phone, just put down the phone. You're reading a newspaper, put aside the newspaper. If they see that we are interested in them, not just interested in judging them, then they'll slowly start opening up. And then slowly we can communicate our concerns. And I would say that even kids today are not foolish. In fact, you could see in today's world, everything is so evident. So even the dangers of drugs, the dangers of, say, unrestrained sexual activity, all these are not unknown to them also. But the point is that if they see the boundaries as simply impositions from their parents, then their teenage rebellion will make them want to go against the boundaries. But if they start seeing the boundaries as something reasonable, something meant for their own good, we say, of course it is meant for their good. But they need to see that. Once they start seeing that, then it becomes much easier. It becomes much, much easier. So in America, this happened that, in America, I don't know how it is in Australia, America in several states, a lot of drugs are available legally. And weed and other things. So kids want to explore that. And for parents, there's a lot of concern. So if the parents say no, it just doesn't register for them. So there's one devotee in America who is actually a de-addiction specialist. And in one of the temples in America, they invited this devotee, and he's a professional. He's an American devotee, he's a professional. They invited him to give a talk to the teenagers about the dangers of drug use. And that's the parents could have spoken the same thing, but he was a professional, he's American. And when he spoke those, this was in the temple itself, in the youth meeting, and they just took it seriously. Because it's not that they are reckless and not concerned about their future. Yes, they may not be as far-sighted as we are. That's natural. We have the experience of age. But so if somehow the principle of boundaries is, the rationale for boundaries is conveyed to them, rather than simply boundaries being imposed, saying that this is our culture and that is their culture, that won't work very long for them. Because you say, okay, I don't necessarily want to follow everything from our culture. So just saying it's our culture will not work. See, in general, our action, it is broadly motivated by four things. One is culture. Culture means this is what we do. Second is tradition. This is what we have always done. So why go to temple on Ekadashi? Why do you go to temple on Janmashtami, Krishna temple on Janmashtami? Oh, that's our culture, that's our tradition, that's what our parents did, that's what our grandparents did. Then third is mood. Okay, why do you go to a temple? I feel good going there. So that's the third reason why we do things. And the fourth is reason or logic. Why do I do this? Because it makes sense. So for us, the idea of boundaries, for us boundaries often just come as a part of our culture and our tradition. No, this is the way it was, and that's what I followed. But that same impetus will not be there for them. Because they are far away from the tradition now, they're here. And the culture here is, they have some culture at home, they have some culture outside. So for us, we need to appeal to them at the level of reason or logic. And if boundaries are presented from this perspective, then it's easier for them to accept it. Okay?
So I think this will be the last question. So this is regarding material education. So the question is, to what extent should practicing devotees give importance to material education?
To
what extent?
Which education?
To chasing a material education, practicing devotees.
For their kids?
For their kids, yeah. Or should we just let the kids do whatever they want? Or is there something? So the question, the next, there's a continuing question. Should we guide them as to say these are the careers you can pursue, or you can pursue anything you like, or in sports, or maybe adventure, or that sort of thing?
Okay. Okay, so how much should we guide our children in their careers? Well, basically with respect to parenting, there are three broad models. One is the model of the clay. The kids are like clay, and the parents are like potter shaping the clay. So this is broadly the Eastern metaphor for parenting. Now the second metaphor is of seed. Seed is, no matter what you do, a mango seed is not going to give an apple. So parents are like seeds, so kids are like seeds, and all that parents can do is to protect. Like a gardener can only protect and facilitate. A gardener can't change the substance of the seed. So this is broadly the Western model of parenting. Metaphor is that's why they have the idea that parents shouldn't intervene. Let the kids do whatever they want. That's a more non-interventionist model. Now if we look at the Bhagavad-Gita, the Bhagavad-Gita's model actually includes both. Because if you consider there is let me put it this way. The self has three levels: the soul, mind, and body. So now, in the in the mind, there are two kinds of impressions. I mentioned that last time briefly. There is two kinds of impressions. One is the vritti. Vritti is the inclinations. So like a Kshatriya inclination, Brahmana inclination, or musical inclination, mathematical inclination. And the second is Vasana. So now, with respect to Vasana and with respect to Vritti, they are two very different things. So with respect to Vritti, it's like a seed. Now, if a child has artistic inclination, no matter how much the parents impose, the child will not become interested in math or physics that much. So that is something which comes from the past. But with respect to vasana, no, that is something which needs to be shaped. Every child can have anger, every child can have greed. I have got 10 chocolates, instead of sharing them with my sibling, I want all 10 myself. No, that has to be shaping. No, you cannot take this. So in terms of shaping the vasanas, or rather shaping the child with respect to regulating the vasanas, it's like clay. So basically, a metaphor that unites both of these could be driving. Say in driving, say if we are driving a car, maybe we get our kid to sit next to us and watch us driving. And while watching, we teach them. And then as the kid wants to learn to drive, maybe at that time, gradually what happens is we exchange seats. If the kid is 16 and wants to learn driving, then the kid sits in the driver, but the parents are next to it. The parents are monitoring. And over a period of time, as the kid learns to regulate their impulses, be watchful, then the parents recede more and more into the background. So it's both. It's both. There are certain things which have to be regulated and that requires disciplining, but there are certain things which do need to be fanned and channeled. That's why it can't be that the parents entirely impose their expectations on the children. To some extent, if we find a good astrologer, then the astrologer can tell to some extent what are the broad interests of the children. But that does not mean that we outsource the responsibility of parenting to the astrologer. That's one of the biggest mistakes when consulting an astrologer. It's like we outsource the responsibility for decision making to the astrologer. No. The responsibility for decision making is the individuals. The astrologer is just one more input to make the decision. But we observe our kids and then we see, okay, what are they naturally drawn towards? Now, if some kid has some extraordinary talent or passion for some field which is non-lucrative, then if the talent is extraordinary, then letting them go in that field is fine. But in general, if that they have some interest, but not a lot of interest, some talent, but not extraordinary talent, then it is good to encourage them to pursue a more lucrative career and also have some time to pursue their particular interest. And then that way, if their interest develops, if their talent develops, then they may explore in that direction, but they also have something to fall back on. So we can't just dismiss their particular interests or talents, but we can't also let them, because nowadays especially, if people go into liberal arts, that is quite glamorized. Humanities and liberal arts are glamorized, but the careers in those fields, there are people going to gender studies and this studies and that studies. Hardly any careers available over there. So, and those fields are also quite, it's not just education, often it's indoctrination. They get indoctrinated in a particular worldview. The mainstream education is quite leftist overall, left-oriented. So, in general, encouraging them to go towards more lucrative fields, STEM fields or something like that, while giving them space to pursue their interests. That might be the best way to move it. Okay.
So that concludes our session today. Thank you so much for patiently answering almost all the questions. Some of it we've, this was the same thing we've already answered. Actually, one of it, there was a specific question how do we deal with children who are not sharing, because I think they're teenagers and they are in their rebellious stage, they're not doing exactly what you already said, that because they don't feel understood, so henceforth they're not sharing. So some of you already came out in your answer. So thank you so much. We should appreciate, give our gratitude to Prabhu. And so, see you all.